So there are three parts. The first part is the harvesting of data into Pure, then like a short introduction about the specific landscape in the Netherlands, because to introduce then Wim, who will talk about the specific experience in Amsterdam. So none of you are, it's going to be no surprise to most of you that research data is becoming important in some countries more than others, but in many cases, open access is no longer in question. In many parts, especially in Europe, open access is done in many places. So what's the next step? And the next step in many cases is open data on the road to open science. So it is getting also more important when you look at funders' requirement. You also what happened in the US in August, and pretty much everyone believes it's going to be the same everywhere. It's just going to spread. So this is pretty good news for open science in general, more open data. And institutions have started to prepare in different ways. The first step was usually the hiring of data stewards. And those days, the stewards were a lot helping about DMPs. That's usually because that was the first requirements for funders. Then you've got the data repositories that were set up. And now that open data is becoming a requirement, we start seeing reporting and compliance becoming more important. So all of those things are coming. Some institutions are more in advance than others, but these are signs that we've seen pretty much everywhere in the world. The issue is that where is your research data? In many cases, you don't know, because what research showed is that on average, up to 90% of an institution's research data is outside of the institutional repository. So some universities are better because they have a very strong internal repository and a lot of resources to support it. But in many cases, that's not the case. Some universities don't even have a data repository. So once you start from there, the question is, how do I keep track of my research data? And that's where we came up with one solution. It's called Data Monitor. And what it does very simply is going to track repositories, harvest the research data, enrich it, adding metadata for the researchers, the institutions, as much as we can. We do a lot of cleanup. It's not perfect, but we do a lot of cleanup. And then we push it, so that's the blue part, and then we push it to the yellow part, which is how do you get it? And of course, today's focus is the first one, it's Pure. But it also comes with a web app, and I'll explain how it can be useful. So if you want to get started and you want to give it a try, there are two options. The first one is a free version that gives you access to everything, but it's the source metadata, the way we find it, so everything that we harvest. And you have a second version that comes with a license, and that's what we've been working on in the Netherlands, where we enrich the data, where we add the institutional affiliation, and we try and do a few things. But the good news is you don't need the license to give it a start to see if it works, to work on the processes. So how do you set this up in Pure? It's pretty simple, actually. It's just 3 steps. You go to the admin tab, you scroll down a lot to datasets, and once in datasets, you've got the import source, and you can set it up pretty much here. So once you have, with the PERT version, you have an API key that sits in there, and you can also do quite a few things, but I think you're mentioning it, Wim, in your presentation, I think.
No, I'm not talking about this. Go on.
Perfect. Then no overlap.
Sometimes it's confusing because import sources is something else, and you have to click on Data Monitor to find the right page.
Yeah, we'll work on this. And the way it can help the institution is in multiple ways. The first thing, which is obvious, is giving you an overview of where your data sets are. It seems like plain and simple, but it's not. The second part is once you have it in the system, it can help complete researcher profiles. You can showcase it on your profile, on your portal, and you can start reporting on data sharing. So some parts are more or less important. Some researchers value research data quite a lot and they want to showcase it. Some institutions want to promote open science, and after open science, open access, as we mentioned, open data is a nice way to say we are in favor of open science and we do what we can. And the last part is, I've seen this in some universities in the Netherlands, where actually they want to see how much researchers are paying attention to the requirements and who's not playing the game. So I'll explain this just after, but we've been working with the Dutch community quite a bit, and it's been a very good relationship. We had a lot of feedback, so nothing is perfect, of course. And some of the issues that were noticed, the first one was it's not easy to select the right content. It requires a lot of work. And so that's where we have a new web application, that's the rdmonitor.com, that enables you to fine-tune very precisely what you want to see in Pure and what you want to exclude very specifically. And those two synchronize perfectly so that you don't have to work with sometimes the integration in Pure that can be improved to find out what you import. You can do it directly in the web app. The second part is the matching that can be time-consuming, matching persons. And that's something that was the original purpose of our discussion with Wim when we applied for this spot, is we want to talk about a project we've been working on to improve the matching. And we're still working on a DPA problem, but it's coming, where we want to find a way to match ideally up to 90% of the researchers so that the manual matching is reduced as a maximum. And the last part is that it's a more philosophical question about what is research data. It's still something we are working on. So we have a content policy, but each university will have a different view about what is research data. And for some, videos are going to be research data. From others, clearly not. So we have to do with those two things. One, definitions that differ from university to university. And second, metadata that is really often not clear. And it says it's a data set. And when you look into it, it's actually just a tab. And that's, or sometimes it's text, or sometimes it's a research article. So we do our best to clean up, but it's not always easy. So that's what, in a nutshell, Data Monitor is. And in a very specific setup, we give it a really good try, which is in the Netherlands. So you may be aware that a couple of years ago, so open data, open science in general, in the Netherlands is a big deal. And a lot is being done about this. So you've got, back in 2017, there was already this open science national program. There are quite a few initiatives. And in 2020, we, Elsevier, signed an agreement with the Dutch community. So the whole Dutch research community, that is, so UNL is the universities, NFU are the hospitals, VH, the Universities of Applied Sciences, NVO is the funder, and CANAVE is the Rural Library, Rural Research Institute. And as part of this agreement, we said, okay, we're going to do open access, of course. We're going to do open reading, but we want to do open science at large. And we're going to develop open science services, any kind of science services. And one of the first ones we released was Data Monitor. We have a second one that we're going to talk about in 2 hours about research infrastructure called Telescope. It's next room in 2 hours. But we need 6 of those. And that's where we stand for the moment. We have 18 members of the community and 18 members that joined this pilot. And as I said, the community has been really working with us to bring feedback, tell us what was working, what was not working. So it's a great place to improve and understand what could be useful for the community. And I'll let the floor to Wim.
Lessons learned. These are my sheets about my experiences at the University of Amsterdam importing data sets. I'll give a little introduction, then tell you a short timeline of what's happened with data sets in our Pure system, then our experiences with Data Monitor and the main issues, and a little looking ahead. So, give you a little bit of context. The University of Amsterdam is one of the oldest in the Netherlands. It's a large university, as you see. I copied this from our website, so this is just a promo talk. The Amsterdam University is also taking part in the Amsterdam Consortium, also called AMSCO, which is a community module that exists next to our 5 institutions of there are 2 universities and 2 medical faculties, also hospitals, and the University of Applied Science taking part. So my name is Wim Klerkx and I work at the University of Amsterdam Library, which is also the library for the University of Applied Sciences, and I do the Pure administration together with Hanneke, who is also here. So the timeline, we started with Pure in 2016, and already then we had some data sets in our previous CRIS that we have migrated to as best as possible with the way we had Pure then. We didn't have the content type data sets enabled yet. Then data sets became more important through the years. So Figshare was introduced as an institutional repository available to researchers to store their data sets. And in 2019, we built an integration with Pure using an existing job, a unified dataset synchronization job. So at that time, there were 65 published datasets that were also to be found in Pure. Then in 2020, there was a breakthrough in more open science, new policies, central guidelines from the UVA staff, and a national requirement came up for reporting on datasets as well. So we enabled the manual registration of datasets as there was a momentum to do that. Researchers were getting more engaged. And we enabled workflow in Pure so we could correct and see what was actually being registered. Then in 2021, we followed the Elsevier VSNU agreement, and we took on the Data Monitor pilot to see what it would bring us. Then there were many discussions on, because we did expect to have work on curation and validation of the metadata that would be coming in. And we had many discussions with both the data stewards. Can you do the curation? Well, we don't have time. And the Pure key users at the faculties. Oh, no, we can't do that also. No, we don't have time for that. So it ended up being a task for the library team that also does the validation of our research output to check the data sets coming in. So we went live this year in April. We have published our support pages, and the metadata team of the library has been busy validating, checking persons, etc. Right now, think of the 65 that we started with. We now have 5,500 dataset records in total, of which over 5,000 were imported from Data Monitor with some extra import candidates. There are now 275 synchronized from our Figshare system, our local Figshare system, and also 136 manually imported, or no, I should have said manually registered by researchers or by their faculty support. So the number of validated data sets has risen quite fast, I think, this year, growing to almost 1,000. I think it's reached 1,000 today. And the number of data sets, looking at the workflow, we have 18% validated. There's 68% waiting for validation. That's, of course, the bulk. And also 14% entry in progress, and I'll get back to that. Oh, sorry, no, I'm going to This is how we show them. We immediately build something to make it also visible for the world outside. The UVA does not have a Pure portal, so we have profile pages that are fed by Pure, and we have made, the link is custom built. So we asked our developers to add the link between a publication and a related data set on their profile pages, which works as you see on the left side. And the same publication, when it is shown in UVA DARE, which is our public repository, digital documents. And also there you see that the publication is metadata, and below is the related data sets that you can click on for that metadata. Looking at the pros and cons, of course, the increase of coverage is quite impressive, and it shows that we've made the right decision to start a data monitor. It's obvious. And also the importing of links to the publications, so you can establish and show the link between the dataset and the publication, providing more context, is very useful and highly appreciated also by our research community. Some cons. Now, the first two, well, I have separate sheets for them, so I'll get to them in somewhat more detail. The third is special characters. Obviously, some technical work must still be done on encoding. There are some duplicates coming in through various scenarios, as we've seen. For example, the same data set has been registered in 2 different or more different repositories. But also we have versions that have separate DOIs and are imported because they don't have an exactly matching DOIs. I think we might have to have some discussions on version management in the sources and also in our Pure systems. And there are still, well, we have a hospital and a faculty of health, but it has its own Pure system. So we don't like the medical centers data sets coming into our Pure, so we try to exclude those with our custom query that is available in the configuration, but it's cycling through somehow, we don't know exactly how. But the main problems and issues that we deal with is right now, in fact, the matching on persons is a core business. When a data set comes in with just a UVA affiliation and nothing more than that, it's not much to go on. We can't use that for profiling, for reporting, for showcasing. So we need a match with our research staff, our internal persons in Pure. But of course, in many cases, data monitors gives us data sets affiliated only to the university on the institutional level. So sometimes one data set has hundreds of contributors and they're all imported as external persons. And we just have to guess which of those is the internal person which should have been matched in the first place to our internal person. And that's a lot of work for our validation team to do. And of course, this summer, we were hoping to have this beautiful pilot with Guillaume to try to match internal persons prior to importing, but we have to have some patience on that. Another very important issue is this a data set? We have stuff coming in, and there's lack of definitions and scope of what is a data set. And in fact, now Data Monitor has turned to the term research data, which is obviously a bit broader, so you can add some more types. But a data set, in our view, is a collection of data collected during research. So, and what would you think about supplemental material? This is something that publishers of journals also put in their repositories, questionnaires used in research, but it's not the research data themselves. So we've agreed with the validation team to set those records to entry in progress. We can't delete them because the next load will again import them. And that's why we had so many entry in progress records in the graph. Now, I have to say also credit to Guillaume and his team that during the summer they have been major improvements to the automatic exclusion of some of those types. Looking ahead, I think datasets are here to stay, and the curation of automatically imported datasets will remain necessary. The pilot gives us hope that the validation can go faster. And just to show you some growing interest, 43 researchers have been so engaged that they've actually entered their own data sets. I don't believe we can educate researchers to improve. And now I'll just stop talking.